They called her worthless. A starving mother horse slams her body against a metal gate like she's trying to break out of something worse than pain. Bang! Bang! Then, under the chaos, a tiny broken whine. Ava, a female veteran, freezes. That sound hits something deep. She steps closer, and the mare blocks her, protecting something in the straw. When Ava finally sees it, 5 trembling puppies hidden beneath her, it stops her cold. Like and subscribe to uncover the truth and enjoy the story. The first bang hit hard enough to make the hanging light above the back lot sway. Not the ordinary rattle of livestock shifting in a trailer before dawn. Not the impatient stomp of an animal waiting to be unloaded. This was heavier, desperate. A full-body collision against steel that shook the rusted gate and sent a chain clinking against the latch. Then it came again. Bang! And again. Bang! Behind the county auction barn, men stopped what they were doing and looked over, but none of them moved closer. The cold cut through the alley between the loading pens. Wet hay, diesel fumes, and old manure sat thick in the air. A yellow floodlight buzzed overhead. Somewhere farther off, a generator hummed. Then the horse screamed. Ava Brooks froze beside her truck. That sound went through her like something sharp and familiar. Panic had a language. It didn't matter whether it came from a human throat or an animal one. Real panic stripped everything down to the same raw note. Ava had heard it years ago in another life, under another kind of metal, when nobody could afford to freeze and everybody did anyway for half a second too long. Another violent crash slammed through the lot. Someone near the dock muttered, "That thing's gonna kill itself." Ava turned toward the trailer. It sat crooked beneath the floodlight, white paint stained brown with mud and road salt. One side panel was dented inward. The faded company lettering had been scraped nearly clean. The back chain hung loose, tapping softly between impacts like nervous teeth. A man in a canvas jacket stood a few feet away, watching with the bored patience of somebody waiting for a problem to become cheaper. Ava started toward him. "That yours?" He glanced at her, calm as dry wood. Mid-40s, groomed beard, clean boots. Too polished for a place like this. Unfortunately. Inside the trailer, something hit the wall so hard the hinges squealed. Ava kept walking. "Wouldn't," the man said. "She's mean." Ava didn't slow down. The gravel crunched beneath her boots. The closer she got, the clearer the sound became. Hooves striking metal. Ragged breathing. A strained, broken wicker that cracked into something almost human. But underneath all of it, buried low, nearly lost, was another sound. A faint little whine. Not the sound of a horse. Small, weak, irregular. Ava stopped at the side slat and peered in. At first, she saw only chaos. A blur of mud-caked hide hurling itself across the narrow trailer. A mare. Thin in a way that made the word thin feel dishonest. Her ribs stood out harsh beneath a filthy winter coat. Her hips were sharp. Her mane hung in rough, matted ropes. She looked like something already halfway gone. And yet she was fighting like something with everything left to lose. The mare slammed one last time into the gate, and then spun and planted herself in the rear corner of the trailer. Her ears flattened. Her chest heaved. Her legs trembled so badly they looked ready to fold. But she didn't lunge at the opening. She blocked it. She stood between the door and a patch of dirty straw in the back as if that straw were the last sacred ground left on earth. Ava bent lower. There it was again, that tiny sound. A small, cracked little cry. She narrowed her eyes, trying to see past the mare's shoulder. For 1 second she caught movement in the straw. Then another. Then the shape of one fragile body pressing against another. And suddenly, the scene came into focus. Puppies. 5 of them. Tiny, trembling, half buried in the straw, tucked beneath the curve of the mare's body like they belonged there. One barely lifted its head. One pawed weakly at the others. One gave a soft cry so thin it sounded more like a breath breaking than a voice. Their coats were dirty, Their bellies were hollow. Their whole bodies looked cold. For a moment, even the wind seemed to stop. Ava stared through the slat, unable to move. The mare lowered her head toward the litter, touching the nearest puppy with her nose so gently it hurt to watch. Then she lifted her face back toward the door and fixed Ava with a look so raw, so exhausted, so fiercely alive that it seemed to split the whole ugly morning open. She wasn't attacking. She was begging the world not to take one more thing from her. Boots scraped behind Ava. The man in the canvas jacket stepped beside her. His name patch read Marlin Vicks. "Worthless," he said. Ava didn't answer. Marlin nodded toward the mare. "And whatever she's hiding, dump it." The words landed like something rotten dropped into clean water. Ava turned her head slowly. "What did you just say?" Marlin shrugged. "No papers on the mare. No usable brand record. No reason to waste money. And those pups?" He glanced toward the trailer with visible disgust. "Not mine. Somebody must have tossed them in." Inside, one of the puppies whimpered. The mare reacted instantly, shifting her body to cover them more fully. Ava looked back through the slat. That was when she noticed the rope burn along the mare's jaw. Angry, raw, rubbed deep into the skin. There were sores along her shoulder, too. A patch near the flank where hair had been scraped off. Neglect left marks. So did force. Ava knew the difference. "She needs a vet," Ava said. Marlin laughed once without humor. "She needs a bullet." One of the men by the loading dock looked away. Another pretended to busy himself with a clipboard. Nobody said a word. The mare's breathing rasped in the dark. Her sides hollowed in and out. She was shaking harder now. Starving, exhausted, probably at the edge of collapse. And still she stood over those puppies like her own body was the last wall between them and the world. Ava couldn't stop staring. There was something unbearable about the sight of her. Not because it was strange, though it was. Not because it was cruel, though it was that too. But because Ava recognized something in those eyes. That look. The look of a living thing that had already lost too much and would rather break than fail one more helpless life. Ava had worn that look herself once. Maybe more than once. Marlin folded his arms. "Auction overflows full of junk like this. Some things don't pencil out." Ava's jaw tightened. Junk. Worthless. Dump it. People always reached for those words when they wanted permission. Permission not to care. Permission to look at suffering and call it math. Inside the trailer, the smallest puppy coughed. The mare dipped her head immediately, brushing it with her muzzle. Counting them, Ava thought. She's counting them. A gust of wind swept through the lot, carrying loose straw across the gravel. The floodlight flickered once. Somewhere a gate slammed. But in that narrow strip of cold behind the auction barn, the whole world had narrowed to one impossible image. A broken-down mare nobody wanted protecting 5 shaking puppies like they were the last good thing she had left. Ava lifted her hand toward the latch. Marlin's voice sharpened. "Don't." She didn't look at him. Why? Because she'll come through that gate. But he said it too fast. Ava turned then, really looking at him for the first time. At the polished calm, at the tight jaw beneath it, at the eyes that kept flicking not to the mare but to the latch, to the trailer, to the thing he needed sealed shut. And just like that, Ava knew. This wasn't only cruelty. Cruelty was common. This was disposal. The kind that happened fast. Quiet, before daylight, before anyone could ask the wrong questions. A weak sound rose again from the straw. One of the puppies trying to cry. The mare lifted her head and stared straight at Ava. Dark eyes wet. Flanks quivering, body failing, but instinct standing tall where strength no longer could. Ava stepped closer to the gate. Marlin moved with her. "Ma'am, walk away." She ignored him. The mare did not charge, did not strike. She only stood there trembling over those tiny bodies, protecting them with the last of herself. Ava leaned close enough for only the mare to hear. "What did they do to you?" The mare said nothing, of course, but one of the puppies answered with a faint, broken whine from beneath her chest. And that was enough. Ava straightened slowly, pulse pounding, the cold gone from her hands now. She understood, with the terrible clarity that only comes once and changes everything after it. Someone wanted this mare gone. Someone wanted those puppies gone with her. And the moment Ava touched that latch, her life was never going back to what it had been before. By 6:30, the sky over Miller County had turned the color of cold steel. Ava Brooks was back in her apartment, but the trailer had followed her home. Not the rusted metal, not the smell of diesel and wet hay, the sound. That pounding still lived under her ribs, steady as a second heartbeat. So did the mare's eyes. So did those tiny cries hidden beneath her body. Ava stood in her kitchen holding a mug of coffee that had already gone lukewarm, staring at the dark window over the sink as if it might show her a version of the morning she could still forget. It didn't. Her apartment was quiet in a way that felt organized from the outside and lonely from within. The table had 2 chairs, though nobody ever sat in the second. The sink was empty. The counters were clean. Her coat hung on the same hook every night. There were no framed photographs facing outward, no clutter, no softness. Everything had a place, and everything stayed there. That was how Ava liked it. When things stayed in their place, they were easier to survive. She took a sip of coffee. It tasted burnt. She drank it anyway. On the counter sat her keys, a gas receipt, and the folded auction slip she had brought home without meaning to. She looked at it for a second too long. A scrap of paper from a place she had no business thinking about anymore. And yet, there it was, lying in her kitchen like proof that part of that barn had already crossed the line into her life. Ava hated how quickly that could happen. In the bedroom, her top dresser drawer stood open an inch. From where she stood, she could just make out the edge of the folded flag inside. Beneath it, half-shadowed, lay a pair of old dog tags on a chain she had not touched in years. She turned her eyes away, not because she didn't remember, because she remembered too clearly. And the mare had looked at her the way broken things looked at the last person still standing near them. Not with hope exactly. Hope came later, if it came at all. First came the harder thing, recognition, the silent knowledge that pain could identify its own kind without needing a single word. Ava set the mug down. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass. Late 30s, broad shoulders, hair pulled back too tight. A face that looked calm because it had spent years practicing. People trusted that face. It belonged to someone who seemed capable, steady, unmessy. She had built that expression on purpose, learned how to flatten emotion until it sounded like competence. That had become her rule. Never get involved. Not really. Do the decent thing from a safe distance. Make the call. File the report. Point someone else in the right direction. But do not take suffering home with you. Do not let it sit at your table. Do not attach your name to pain you cannot afford to fix. That rule had saved her more than once. At least that was what she told herself. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A county shift reminder. Ava looked at it, then back at the dark window. She should have been thinking about work. The drive in. The paperwork waiting on her desk. Dana from the office asking too many questions in that cheerful voice that made curiosity sound harmless. Instead, all Ava could see was that mare bracing herself in the rear corner of the trailer, legs shaking, body failing, but still putting herself between danger and something smaller. Protect the smaller one. The thought came fast and clean. It landed harder than she wanted it to. Her eyes shifted toward the empty leash hook beside the closet. That was another thing she didn't look at long. Rex had been a shepherd mix with one torn ear and the stubborn habit of sleeping across the doorway like he was guarding the apartment against the world. She had gotten him after the army, after the worst of it. when silence had become too loud and sleep had become unreliable. He had stayed through panic attacks, dark winters, and the slow, awkward rebuilding of a life that functioned as long as nobody asked too much from it. Then came the diagnosis. Then came the paper she had to sign. Then came the quiet ride home with his collar on the passenger seat. After that, Ava stopped romanticizing attachment. Love was real. So was the cost. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Dana. "You coming in?" Heard there was some kind of scene at the auction lot. Ava stared at the screen. Small towns moved fast when there was blood in the air, even emotional blood. By noon, people would have a story. By evening, they would have a villain. By tomorrow, they would have turned the whole thing into a lesson about somebody else's bad judgment. As Miller County could smell scandal from 10 miles out and compassion from even farther. Ava typed, "Nothing I couldn't handle." Then she deleted it. She typed, "On my way, sent." Still, she didn't move. The radiator clicked in the corner. A truck hissed past outside on the wet road. Upstairs, somebody dragged a chair across the floor. Life continuing in neat little compartments. Rent over here. Work over here. Hunger over there. A starving mare and 5 half-dead puppies behind an auction barn before sunrise, and coffee cooling in a clean kitchen less than an hour later. That was how the world kept itself running, by teaching people which suffering counted and which suffering could be sorted into somebody else's problem. Ava had once been very good at accepting that bargain. Then memory came back sharp. Not overseas. Not the kind of memory people expected when they heard the word veteran. A kennel. Rain on a corrugated roof. Too many animals. Not enough space. One supervisor saying, "Don't get attached. Half of them won't make placement." And in the back run, one shepherd mix throwing himself against the chain-link gate not to escape, but to cover 2 smaller dogs pressed behind him. Ava had opened that gate. She got written up for it, too. Protocol, liability, boundaries. The words had been different, but the meaning had been the same. Care less. It's cleaner. Ava grabbed her keys from the counter. That should have settled it. Go to work. Keep your distance. Let the barn become one more ugly story this county would chew up and spit out by lunch. Instead, she sat down on the edge of the bed and opened her banking app. The balance on the screen was enough to get through the month if nothing went wrong. Rent in 10 days. Gas. Groceries. 1 tire that had been looking bad for weeks. Not enough for heroic choices. Not enough for a vet bill, emergency feed, transport, or whatever legal swamp a man like Marlon Vicks could stir up if challenged publicly. She looked at the number a long time. Then she locked the phone and slid it into her pocket. The decision didn't feel brave. It felt annoying, expensive, dangerously inconvenient. Like the kind of decision people regretted while making it and then spent years being glad they had. Ava crossed to the dresser and pushed the drawer shut without looking directly at the flag inside. Her hand rested on the wood for 1 brief second. Not a prayer. Not an apology. Just acknowledgement. Grief did not leave. It only got better at standing quietly in furnished rooms. Then she put on her jacket. At the door, she stopped. There were people in Miller County who could hear something suffering and still finish breakfast. People who could glance at a starving animal, shake their heads once, and move on because life was hard and practicality had to win somewhere. Ava had spent years trying to become one of them. Then she saw the mare again in her mind, mud-caked, half-starved, legs trembling, and eyes burning with that last terrible law of love. Protect the smaller one. Ava opened the door. Cold hallway air touched her face. She stepped out, locked the apartment behind her, and listened to the click like it meant more than it should. Her rule had always been simple. Never get involved. But rules were easiest to keep when nothing was looking at you like its life depended on what kind of person you chose to be next. By the time Ava reached the parking lot, She was no longer walking like a woman late for work. She was walking like a woman headed back toward trouble. And beneath the fear, beneath the cost, beneath every practical argument warning her to let this go, one harder truth had already taken hold. If she left that mare there, she would still make rent, still go to work, still wake up tomorrow. But some part of her that had barely survived before would know exactly what she had done. And Ava Brooks could live with a lot. She was no longer sure she could live with that. By the time Ava turned her truck back toward the auction grounds, daylight had arrived without warmth. Morning in Miller County did not come gently. It came pale and exposed, flattening everything that night had managed to hide. The frost on the fence rails, the puddles black with oil rainbow, the feed sacks stacked by the loading dock, the men who had gone home, the ones who had stayed. And, behind the barn, under that same buzzing floodlight now made unnecessary by dawn, the trailer still stood there like a bad thought that refused to leave. Ava parked hard, killed the engine, and stepped out before her better judgment could catch up. The cold bit through her jacket. Gravel cracked under her boots. Nothing had changed. And everything had. The banging was gone now. That frightened her more. She crossed the back lot fast, heart beating harder with every step, and reached the trailer just in time to hear a weak sound from inside. Not the furious slam of a trapped horse, just a thin little cry. Small, exhausted, followed by the rasp of a mare breathing through pain. Ava moved to the slat and looked in. The mare was still standing, barely. She remained in the rear corner, legs trembling, head lowered, her body curved protectively around the patch of straw behind her. In daylight, the damage showed more clearly. Her coat was not just dirty, it was neglected into ruin. Mud had dried in thick plates across her flank. Her hip bones protruded sharply. The rope burn around her jaw looked angrier now, rubbed raw in a deep, ugly band. One shoulder bore a pressure sore. Her eyes were dull with fatigue but not surrender. And under her chest, pressed together in the straw, the 5 puppies still clung to life. One lifted its head weakly, then dropped it again. One crawled half an inch, paw slipping on the metal floor. The smallest one gave a broken little whine that barely reached the air. The mare lowered her muzzle instantly, nudging it back toward warmth. Ava felt something inside her go dangerously still. Not softness. Resolve. "Thought I told you to walk away." Marlon Vix's voice came from behind her, smooth as varnish. Ava turned. He stood a few feet back with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other, as clean and composed as if the morning had brought him nothing more serious than delayed cattle. His boots were polished, his beard was trimmed, even his irritation looked expensive. Ava faced him fully. "I came back for documentation." Marlon smiled without humor. "That so?" "She's emaciated, injured. The puppies are in distress." Ava kept her voice even. "I want the mare's registration, transfer record, and any veterinary paperwork tied to this load." For the first time, something flashed in his eyes. Quick, sharp, gone. "Lady," he said, "there is no paperwork because there is no story. She's a stray-grade mare nobody wants. No papers, no clean brand history, no value. End of it. No value." Ava looked back into the trailer. The mare shifted slightly, shielding the puppies more completely as if she understood tone even if she did not understand words. Her knees nearly buckled with the effort. Still she held. Ava looked at Marlon again. "And the puppies?" Marlon shrugged. "Not mine. They're inside your trailer." "They were inside my trailer when I noticed them." "That's not an answer." He took a slow sip of coffee. "It's the only one you're getting." Ava let the silence stretch. Men like Marlon hated silence when they weren't controlling it. It gave other people time to notice things. The too casual posture. The jaw set a little too tight. The eyes that kept checking not the mare, not the puppies, but Ava's hands, whether she was reaching for a phone, a latch, a witness. She needs a vet, Ava said. She needs to be moved. The answer came too fast. There it was again. Not indifference, urgency. Ava stepped closer to him. Why? Marlin's smile thinned. Because this is auction property. Because I'm not running a rescue operation. Because if every sad-eyed animal in this county came with a violin soundtrack, we'd all go broke by noon. Ava did not blink. Behind her, the smallest puppy cried again. Ava glanced down and spotted something near the edge of the straw. A strip of faded red, caught in the grime where the mare's hoof had nearly covered it. She crouched slightly, angling for a better look through the slat. A torn collar. Not much left of it, just a frayed band and a bent metal ring. Attached to it was part of a tag. Marlin saw her see it. That was the moment he moved. One step only. Casual on the surface, blocking the angle. Ava straightened slowly. Move, she said. Or what? His tone stayed mild, but something ugly had begun to show through the polish now. And the real man under the salesman, the one who had expected this morning to go easier. Ava pulled out her phone. Not to film, not yet. Just to hold it where he could see it. Marlin's nostrils flared once. Ava said, I'm calling for a veterinary welfare check and a microchip scan. That hit him. Barely, but enough. His right eye tightened. His grip on the coffee cup changed. Tiny things. But Ava had spent years learning to read what people tried to hide in the half-second before their faces caught up. Then the mask returned. You do that, he said, and when they ask who interfered with livestock in transit, I'll give them your name first. Ava took one step closer. Give it. The wind moved hard through the lot, lifting loose straw around their boots. Somewhere near the loading dock, a chain clanged against metal. A truck engine started in the distance, then idled low. The whole back lot felt suddenly narrow, as if the morning itself had leaned in to listen. Inside the trailer, the mare turned her head. Her eyes found Ava again, tired, hollow, alert, waiting. Ava looked back through the slat and finally caught the lettering on the torn tag. Not all of it. Just enough. Pine Ridge Vet. The rest had been ripped away, but below it, faint beneath the dirt, she saw 4 words stamped into scratched metal. Microchip on file. Her pulse kicked hard. Those were not words that belonged to random dumped puppies. Not in a rig like this. Not hidden in the straw under a starving mare. Not with a man like Marlin Vicks suddenly trying this hard to stay calm. Ava straightened and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Marlin watched her closely. You're making this into something it isn't. No, Ava said. I think I'm finally seeing what it is. He laughed once. And what's that? Ava glanced at the mare's jaw, at the pressure sores, and at the puppies curled against a body that should have been preserving its last strength for itself. Then she looked straight at him. A cleanup job. The words landed. His face did not change much. That was what made him dangerous. Lesser men flared up. Smarter ones cooled down. Marlin cooled. She's dangerous, he said softly. No papers, no owner, no future. You open that gate and she hurts someone, that's on you. But even that was wrong. The mare had every chance to attack. She hadn't. She had done only one thing since Ava first laid eyes on her. Protected the smaller lives. That wasn't madness. That was motive. Ava took out her phone again and this time dialed. Marlin's voice dropped. Don't be stupid, Ava pressed call. Dr. Lila Chen, she said when the line picked up. It's Ava Brooks. I need you at the county auction lot, right now, and bring a scanner. Marlin's jaw locked. From inside the trailer, one puppy gave a weak little cry, and the mare answered with the softest sound yet, broken nicker that did not belong in a place like this. It was too tender, too human in what it meant. Stay close. I'm here. I'm still here. Ava ended the call without looking away from him. Marlin set down his coffee on the trailer fender. Careful. Control. The movement of a man rearranging his options. You have no authority here, he said. Maybe not. You sign your name to this, you'll regret it. Ava glanced toward the trailer again. The mare was shaking harder now, but she was still on her feet, still standing guard, still refusing to let the world take one more helpless thing without crossing through her first. Ava felt the choice settle inside her with the weight of iron. One small step, she thought. That was all this was. One call, one scan, one form. But she knew better than to lie to herself completely. Small steps were how lives changed direction, and sometimes how buried truths finally got dragged into daylight. Ava met Marlin's stare and spoke with a calm that made him angrier than shouting would have. Marlin, you're not trying to move a problem. She let her eyes flick once toward the torn tag in the straw. You're trying to bury evidence. And for the first time that morning, he did not answer at all. Dr. Lila Chen arrived 17 minutes later in a mud-splashed pickup with a scanner case on the passenger seat and the expression of a woman who had already decided she was not going to like what she found. She stepped out into the cold, pulled on gloves, and took one look at Ava's face before asking the only question that mattered. How bad? Ava nodded toward the trailer. Lila crossed the gravel without another word. Marlin Vicks stayed where he was, hands in his jacket pockets now, posture relaxed enough to look harmless if you didn't know better. But Ava knew better. Men like him believed calm was a kind of ownership. The quieter he stood, the more he expected the scene to belong to him. Lila reached the slats and looked in. Her whole body changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Her shoulders tightened, her mouth hardened. And the professional distance remained, but indignation moved in underneath it like fire under a locked door. Oh, she said softly. That one word carried more judgment than shouting could have. Inside the trailer, the mare shifted her weight and nearly lost it. Her front knees trembled violently. One hoof slid half an inch on the metal floor before she caught herself. But even then, she kept her body angled over the puppies, keeping them behind the line of her chest as if her own collapse was negotiable, but their safety was not. That was the first clue. The heart clue. Not because it was sentimental, because it was undeniable. The mare had nothing left to spend, no body fat, no strength, no reserve. Hunger had hollowed her down to instinct and bone. Yet she was still choosing them, still spending her last ounce of balance to stand between those tiny lives and the world that had already failed all of them. Leela exhaled through her nose. She's in bad shape. Can you sedate her enough to examine the pups? Ava asked. Not safely in a trailer this narrow. Lila studied the mare's jaw, her shoulder, the way her flanks pulled inward with each breath. But if she's really protecting, rather than escalating, we may not need to. Marlin gave a dry laugh from behind them. That horse is dangerous. Lila didn't turn around. Dangerous animals don't usually position themselves like shields. Marlin said nothing to that. Ava almost did. Instead, she watched him from the edge of her vision. He had taken out his phone. Not openly. Just low near his thigh, screen tipped away, thumb moving once, then again. Ava's attention sharpened. She shifted half a step, enough to catch the glow of the screen reflected faintly in the trailer's scratched metal. One message thread, one line visible before he angled it down. Move it tonight. No witnesses, no paper trail. Ava felt the morning narrow. That was the second clue, the danger clue. Not suspicion anymore, not intuition. Language, intent. The kind men used when they believed they were arranging inconvenience rather than ending lives. Her jaw tightened. Marlin sensed the change and glanced up too quickly. What? He said. Ava held his gaze a second too long. Nothing. But it was not nothing. It was the soundless moment when a gut feeling turned into structure, when cruelty stopped being random and became organized, planned, shared. efficient. The mare gave a weak, broken nicker and lowered her head toward the straw. One puppy responded with a tiny cry. Lila moved slowly, talking low as she unlatched the side access panel just enough to slide an arm and scan her through without forcing the mare into panic. "It's okay, girl," she murmured. "Nobody's taking them right now." The mare flinched at first. Her ears pinned. Her nostrils widened. Every tendon in her neck stood out. And then Ava stepped closer to the opening and spoke, not loudly, just steadily. "You're all right," she said. "Stay with me. Stay right there." Something in the mare recognized tone over language. Her body stayed rigid, but she did not strike. Lila crouched lower and guided the scanner toward the nearest puppy. The little body barely moved beneath the straw. Dirty, cream-colored fur. Hollow sides. One tiny paw tucked under awkwardly. The scanner passed once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. Lila adjusted the angle. Then the scanner chirped. A small sound. Electronic. Clean. Almost absurdly cheerful for a moment like this. Everyone heard it. Lila looked up sharply. Marlin did too. That was the third clue. The proof clue. Lila withdrew the scanner and stood. "That puppy is chipped." Marlin recovered first. "Doesn't prove anything." "No," Lila said, "but it starts proving things." She carried the scanner case to the hood of her truck and pulled out a tablet. Fingers moving quickly over the screen. Ava stood beside her, arms folded against the cold, while behind them the mare remained locked over the puppies in the trailer like a sentry made of hunger and will. The record loaded. Lila read in silence first. Then, once more, slower. Ava watched her face. "What?" she asked. Lila turned the screen just enough for Ava to see. Not every detail. Just enough. Clinic registration, breed note, owner of record, partial address in the next county over. A recognizable name. Not famous, not publicly untouchable, but known. One of those local names that traveled in lowered voices attached to clean business fronts and dirty rumors. Breeding, sales, transport. Good stock. Private deals. No questions if the money clears. Marlin stepped closer. "Let me see that." Lila turned the tablet back toward herself. "No." His smile returned. But the effort showed now. "This is becoming harassment." Ava looked from him to the screen and back again. Suddenly the pieces were no longer floating. They were beginning to lock. A mare with no clean paperwork. Puppies with a chip. A message about no witnesses. A man too eager to move everything before full daylight. The whole thing smelled wrong in a way neglect alone never did. Lila handed Ava her phone. "Take pictures." Ava moved without hesitation. The rope burn around the mare's jaw, the pressure sores, the sharp line of ribs, the puppies half buried in straw, the torn red collar near the back wall, everything time-stamped, everything real. Marlin's voice lost some of its polish. "You can't just document private property." Lila finally turned to face him fully. "Animal cruelty is not private property." The words landed hard. For the first time, a couple of auction hands lingering near the loading dock looked over and stayed looking, not stepping in, not helping, but no longer pretending not to hear. In towns like this, that mattered. Public silence could protect a man. Public attention could start to cost him. Ava crouched near the trailer again and reached carefully through the side gap, fingers brushing straw until she found the torn collar. The mare tensed at once. Ava stopped moving. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not taking one. I'm taking the truth." The mare's breath came fast. Her body shivered violently. But she did not lash out. Ava eased the collar free and turned it over in her hand. Faded red nylon. Bent ring. Half a tag still attached. Pine Ridge Vet was stamped across the top. Below it, scratched but legible enough, the words remained. Microchip on file. Ava stood and passed it to Lila. Marlin took one step forward. That came from somewhere else. Sure it did, Ava said. He looked at her then, really looked. The threat had changed shape now. It was no longer the easy swagger of a man handling disposable lives in a back lot before breakfast. Now he was calculating exposure, witnesses, records, time, which meant Ava's small step had done exactly what small steps sometimes did. It had triggered consequence. Lila closed the scanner case. I'm placing a temporary medical hold recommendation. Marlin laughed once, but it came out thin. On whose authority? Mine, she said, as the attending veterinarian documenting visible distress and probable abuse. You don't own that horse. No, Lila said, but I can sure as hell describe what's happening to her. Marlin's phone buzzed. He checked it instantly. That was when the headlights swept across the clinic forms on Lila's hood. Not the clinic, not yet. The back lot. A vehicle had turned in slow from the service road and was rolling toward them without hurry, beams cutting through the pale morning like a deliberate warning. Dark truck, tinted windows, engine low and steady. No one spoke. Even the auction hands went still. Marlin slipped his phone into his pocket and straightened. Something cold settled over his face now. A new kind of confidence. Not relief, exactly, but reinforcement. Whoever was in that truck, he had expected them, or at least understood what their arrival meant. Ava felt her pulse climb. Beside her, Lila lowered her voice. You see that? Ava nodded once. The truck kept coming, slow enough to make a point. Inside the trailer, one of the puppies cried again, and the mare answered with a trembling nicker, still standing, still guarding, still refusing to surrender what the world had marked for disposal. Ava looked at the approaching headlights, then at Marlin, then back at the mare. Now the truth had a shape. Not complete. Not yet. But enough. Enough heart to break her. Enough danger to sharpen her. Enough proof to make turning away impossible. Here the truck rolled to a stop 20 feet from the trailer. Engine idling. Lights still on. And in that hard white glare, Ava understood the real cost of what she had done. She had moved one piece. Now the other side was moving back. The man who stepped out of the truck did not look like trouble at first. That was the point. He wore a county jacket, pressed jeans, and the kind of polished boots that had never had to move quickly in mud. Mid-50s. Trim hair. Clean hands. He shut the truck door with calm precision and walked toward the trailer carrying a folder instead of a weapon, which in Miller County often amounted to the same thing. Marlin's face changed the instant he saw him. Not relief, validation. There was a difference, and Ava caught it immediately. This is Deputy Commissioner Harlan Pike, Marlin said almost casually, oversees transport compliance for county auctions. Pike gave Ava a brief nod, then Lila, then the trailer. His gaze lingered on nothing long enough to suggest concern. He had the smooth, practiced look of a man who had spent years turning ugly facts into orderly paperwork. What seems to be the issue? He asked. The mare answered for them. A puppy cried from inside the trailer, a tiny, frayed sound. The mare shifted violently, placing herself over the litter again, though her legs were trembling so badly now it looked like the motion might bring her down for good. Lila stepped forward. The issue is visible distress, probable abuse, and a medical emergency. Pike opened the folder. This shipment is logged as salvage livestock pending transfer. Ava stared at him. Salvage? He did not look up. Unregistered mare, no certifiable market value, disputed animal debris in transport. For 1 second, the words did not even sound like English. Animal debris. That was what he had called the puppies. Something hot and sharp moved through Ava's chest. Behind her, one of the auction hands muttered, Jesus, under his breath. Pike continued in the same even tone. Mister, and Vix has filed notice of interference. If unauthorized persons obstruct lawful movement of auction property, the county may pursue penalties. There it was. Not a raised voice, not a threat shouted in anger. A cleaner thing, a colder thing, cruelty with a stamp on it. Lila's mouth hardened. Those animals need treatment. Pike finally looked up. Doctor, you are welcome to submit an assessment through the proper channels. The proper channels won't keep that mare standing another hour. Pike gave a thin smile that never touched his eyes. That is not for you to decide unilaterally. Ava looked from him to Marlin and understood the structure all at once. Marlin was the hand. Pike was the glove. One did the dirty work. The other made sure it passed for procedure. Marlin folded his arms. I've been patient here. Ava turned on him. Patient? He shrugged. You people are emotional. I've allowed the vet to look. I've allowed your little photos. But this is still my transport. Your transport? Ava said. There are live animals in there. Pike closed the folder softly. Ms. Brooks, I'd advise you to step back before you make this worse for yourself. The sentence landed with deliberate weight. Not because of the words, because of how calmly he said them. Ava knew men like him too. Men who never had to shout because the system had spent years learning their voice. Men who could ruin people in complete sentences and still make it sound like guidance. Behind the slats, another weak puppy cry rose into the cold. Then came a sudden scraping sound. Ava turned. The smallest puppy had slipped partly free of the straw nest and wriggled toward the narrow gap near the trailer gate, little paws scratching uselessly against metal. It was crying now, thin, continuous, desperate, trying somehow to get back to the mare's legs. The mare reacted instantly. She lunged sideways to reach it, but the trailer was too tight, as her body too weak. Her hoof slid. Her shoulder slammed the sidewall. The whole trailer shuddered. Open the gate, Lila snapped. No, Marlin said. The puppy cried again. Pike lifted one hand. No one touches that latch. Ava felt something inside her go still. Not fear, the end of fear. The mare stretched her neck toward the puppy, nostrils wide, making a sound so low and broken it barely counted as a nicker. Come back. Stay close. I'm here. It was a mother's voice trapped in a body that had already been robbed too many times. The puppy made it another few inches. Then Marlin moved. It happened fast, but not too fast to be seen. He stepped forward, kicked a spray of filthy straw toward the gap, then yanked the outer bar with enough force to rattle the metal and send a hard clang through the trailer, meant to scare the puppy back, meant to force movement, meant to remind every living thing inside that he controlled the door. The puppy squealed, and the mare threw herself between the noise and that tiny body. She took the impact on her shoulder, a dull, brutal hit of bone against steel. The sound of it tore through the back lot. Even Pike flinched. That was the moment the bystanders changed. Not into heroes, not yet, but their eyes lifted, their bodies turned. A man near the dock stopped pretending to stack feed sacks. Another took 2 steps closer. Outrage, once it has an image, gets harder to keep at a safe distance. Ava already had her phone up, recording. Say it again, she said, voice low and lethal. Tell me one more time this is lawful. Marlin saw the phone and lost the last clean layer of his expression. Put that down. No. Pike stepped in. Recording county personnel without... Ava cut him off. That mare just took a blow protecting a crying puppy while you both stood here quoting transport language. Lila moved to the trailer. She may go down. Doctor, step away, Pike barked. Lila didn't move. Ava didn't either. The mare was shaking violently now, but somehow still standing, body curved around the litter again. The smallest puppy had managed to drag itself back under her chest. One of the others whimpered. Another did not move at all except for the shallow flutter of breath. Ava felt rage rise clean and cold. This was what people never said out loud. Not really. Evil rarely arrived foaming at the mouth. Usually it came laminated, signed, smelling faintly of coffee and aftershave. It called helpless things debris. It called starvation transfer. It called delay compassion interference. And then it expected decent people to be too intimidated by policy to call it what it was. Marlin pointed at Ava's phone. "You're interfering with county commerce." Ava laughed once, short and disbelieving. "County commerce?" Pike stepped closer. "Miss Brooks, if you continue obstructing movement, there may be consequences for your employment." There it was, the real threat, stripped clean. Not just fines, not just trespass. Her job, and her rent, her survival. For one brief second, the whole ugly math of adulthood flashed before her. Bills, gas, the banking app on her bed that morning. The narrow margin of a life she had fought to rebuild. All the ways one reckless act could split it open. Marlin saw the hesitation and smiled. That was his mistake, because he smiled while the mare was bleeding more at the shoulder. He smiled while 5 puppies shook in the straw. He smiled because he thought fear and practicality were the same thing. Ava lowered the phone just enough to free one hand. Then she stepped past Pike. "Don't," he said sharply. She reached for the latch. Marlin grabbed her wrist, hard this time. Not enough to bruise immediately, enough to make the truth public. Every head in the lot turned. Ava looked down at his hand on her arm, then up into his face. Slowly, clearly, she said, "Take your hand off me." "Open that gate," he said, voice gone flat. "Oh, then you'll lose your job for this." For a split second, no one breathed. The floodlight buzzed overhead. The truck engine idled. Inside the trailer, the mare's ragged breathing scraped the silence raw. Then Ava pulled her wrist free. She opened the gate bar herself, and without raising her voice, without theatrics, without 1 ounce of hesitation left, she said the sentence the whole morning had been building toward. "Then I'll lose it." The latch dropped. Metal clanged. The lot went dead quiet. Ava's hand stayed on the gate. "Open the damn gate." For the first time since dawn, Marlin Vicks looked at her not like an inconvenience, but like a threat, and that changed everything. The gate opened 3 inches. That was all. Not enough for drama, not enough for escape, just enough for truth to begin slipping through. Ava held the metal with both hands, feeling the cold bite into her palms. The mare did not charge, did not strike, did not even lunge toward freedom. She did the same thing she had done from the start. She tightened around the puppies and trembled where she stood, protecting them with a body that had already given too much. That silence hit the back lot harder than shouting would have, because everyone saw it now. Everyone. The mare was not violent. She was maternal. She was starving, injured, frightened, and still trying to shield lives smaller than her own. Lila moved first. Calm, slow, professional to the bone. "Easy, girl," she said, stepping to the opening with one gloved hand extended. Nobody's taking them. Not right now." The mare's nostrils widened. Her ears flicked back. Her shoulder quivered violently where she had taken the blow. But she didn't attack. She lowered her head an inch toward the smallest puppy, then lifted it again toward Ava, as if asking the only question that mattered. "Can I trust this?" Ava answered without thinking. "Yes," she said softly. "You can." The words were not for the people watching, not for Pike, not for Marlin, not even for Lila. They were for the creature still standing on faith after the world had given her none. Behind them, Marlin laughed once, but the sound came out strained now. "This is insane." Lila didn't look back. No, what was insane was calling these animals debris. Pike stepped forward, folder still in hand, trying to reassemble control before it left him entirely. "Doctor, you are exceeding the scope of a field assessment." Lila turned just enough to let him see her face. "No," she said. I teach him witnessing a medical emergency." And for the first time that morning, Pike had no quick reply, because the visual had betrayed him. All his clean words had been dragged into daylight and forced to stand beside the mare's raw shoulder, the puppy's hollow sides, the rope burn at her jaw. Bureaucracy always sounded weaker when something innocent was visibly shaking behind it. Ava widened the gate another inch. The mare stayed where she was, still guarding, still counting breath against duty. Lila slipped inside the narrow opening sideways, careful not to crowd the mare, careful not to break the fragile trust holding the whole scene together. She crouched low and set down a folded blanket, a shallow pan of water, and a small syringe of electrolyte solution. The smallest puppy tried to crawl toward the moisture before it even understood what it smelled. That tiny movement nearly undid Ava. Not because it was dramatic, because it was small. Small was always worse. Small meant quiet suffering, the kind the world missed unless somebody chose to kneel for it. Lila reached the closest puppy first. "I need 30 seconds, she murmured, more to the mare than the humans. "Just 30. The mare flinched when Lila's hand passed her chest. Her muscles tightened so hard Ava thought the whole fragile truce would snap. But then Ava spoke again, low and steady. "She's helping," Ava said. "Stay with me. Stay right there." The mare's gaze locked onto Ava's face, and that was enough. Lila lifted the puppy gently, wrapped it in the blanket, and placed a few drops of fluid against its mouth. The tiny body resisted at first, then swallowed. Once, twice, a faint, desperate little instinct returning. Another puppy whimpered, then another, life recognizing the possibility of mercy. Ava swallowed hard and looked away for 1 second, toward the pale sky over the barn roof, because her throat had gone too tight. She had spent years mastering the art of functional distance. That was how adults survived. That was how veterans survived. That was how people with rent and grief and bad memories survived. You handled what was in front of you without letting it into your bloodstream. But that rule had failed her the moment she heard those tiny cries under the mare's body. Because some suffering did not stay outside you. Some entered like weather. Lila worked methodically. Fluids, quick visual checks, gentle palpation, notes spoken aloud for the record, every word deliberate. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple pressure sores, rope abrasion along mandible, suspected blunt force trauma to left shoulder, puppies hypothermic, undernourished, at least one limping, immediate stabilization required. Ava recorded every second, not because she wanted content, because she wanted evidence, because somewhere along the line she had realized that in places like Miller County, pain alone was not enough. You had to translate it into documents before power admitted it existed. Pike knew that too. Which was why he was retreating by fractions now, not in body, but in tone. "Ms. Brooks," he said, trying for measured concern, "you need to understand this can still become a liability matter." Ava did not turn around. "Funny, I was just thinking it already became a cruelty matter." Marlin stepped closer. "You think you're saving something here? You're making yourself part of it." Ava looked at him then. He was rattled now. Not broken. Men like him did not break easily. But the shine had come off. Too many witnesses. Too many photos. Too much daylight. The story was escaping him. Good, Ava thought. Let it. Inside the trailer, Lila paused with one hand lightly against the mare's lower abdomen. Her expression changed. Not alarm first. Recognition. She checked again. Slower this time. Then let her hand rest there one extra beat, yet as if confirming something the body had whispered before the mind could name it. Ava saw it immediately. "What?" Lila looked up. The answer, when it came, was quiet enough that it made the whole moment feel sacred. She foaled recently? Everything stopped. Even the wind seemed to. Ava stared at her. What? Lila kept her voice low. Not long ago, weeks maybe, her body's still showing postpartum changes. She glanced at the mare, then at the puppies pressed beneath her chest. And I'd bet almost anything she lost that foal. The words landed in Ava like a blow. Not because they were surprising, because suddenly they made terrible, devastating sense. The guarding, the counting, the way the mare curved her body around those puppies not like a predator hiding prize, but like a mother refusing a second empty space. Ava looked at the mare again. Really looked. At the exhaustion, the vigilance, the grief that had no language except instinct. She wasn't confused. She wasn't deranged. Her body had prepared to protect a baby, feed a baby, search for a baby. And when hers was gone, these 5 small cries had found the wound before the world did. The mare lowered her muzzle and touched the nearest puppy with impossible gentleness. Once, then twice, as if checking. Still here. Ava felt something crack inside her, not loudly, not all at once, but enough. I know, she whispered before she meant to. Lila glanced up. Ava's eyes stayed on the mare. I know what it is, she said, voice thinning, to lose someone, and still have to keep breathing. She did not mean to say more, did not explain, but memory had already entered the space between her ribs and opened its hand. Not the war, not first. Rex, the quiet ride home, the leash hook, the bowl left on the floor 2 days too long because removing it made the loss feel official. And beneath that grief, older griefs, human ones, buried ones, and the kind she had stacked over neatly with work and routine and silence. The mare looked at Ava as if pain recognized itself again. No words, no miracle. Just that unbearable exchange between wounded beings who had both been asked to continue after something essential was taken. Lila resumed her work gently. We need transport now. Controlled, warm stall, refeeding plan, fluids, puppy support. If we wait, we may lose one before noon. That snapped the moment back into motion. Ava stood. Then we move now. Pike recovered enough to try once more. You cannot authorize. Lila cut him off. Watch me document it. And that was when Ava's phone buzzed in her pocket. Once. Twice. A formal notice from county administration. Complaint filed, interference, harassment, conduct review pending. She read it in silence. Marlin saw the screen light and smiled again, a smaller smile now, meaner for being smaller. There it is, Ava thought. The bill. This was how the system punished compassion when compassion threatened profitable rot. It did not always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it came by email, sometimes with committee language, sometimes with a meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 9, and your paycheck trembling quietly underneath it. A year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, that message might have stopped her cold. Now she looked from the screen to the mare, to the puppies, to the raw mark on that exhausted shoulder, and felt something settle instead of shake. Not recklessness, clarity. Because there it was at last, the clean divide. Keep your job safe and your soul compromised, or risk the first to protect what was left of the second. Ava locked the phone and put it away. Marlin noticed. So did Pike. Lila noticed too, and in her eyes, for one brief second, there was not pity, but respect. Outside the trailer, the morning had fully arrived. Men were gathering at the edges of the lot now, pretending to check loads, pretending to smoke, pretending not to witness history rearranging itself in front of a rusted gate, because that was what this was. Not just rescue, exposure. The moment when hidden cruelty lost control of its own narrative. Inside, the mare finally lowered herself one trembling inch at a time, as if her body had received the first permission it trusted. Not to die. To rest. She folded down beside the puppies carefully, painfully, still curving her body around them even as the strength went out of her legs. The smallest one crawled against her chest. The mare breathed out, long and shuddering. Ava stood there watching, her own breath unsteady now, and understood something she had spent years trying not to know. People like to call rescue a noble thing. Often it was not noble at all. Often it was inconvenient, expensive, frightening, and badly timed. Often it arrived exactly when your life was least prepared to hold it. And still, if you were lucky or doomed, you recognized it. You recognized the moment something helpless looked at you and your future stopped belonging entirely to you. Leela rose to her feet. "I'll prep the clinic stall." Ava nodded. Then she looked once more at the mare, at the puppies breathing against her, at the whole impossible broken family stitched together by grief and instinct and one stubborn refusal to abandon the small. And in that cold auction lot, with a complaint already filed against her name and trouble gathering from every side, Ava understood the truth with a force that left no room for retreat. She had not rescued them for praise. She had rescued them because if she walked away now, she would become the kind of person she could never forgive. By noon, Miller County had already chosen sides. That was the way places like this worked. Truth rarely arrived first. First came the phone calls, then the whispers, then the respectable versions of ugly things, cleaned up just enough to survive daylight. By the time Ava followed Dr. Lila Chen's truck to the clinic with the mare and puppies in temporary medical hold, the story had already begun spreading ahead of them. Some calling her brave, others calling her reckless, and a few, the most dangerous kind, calling it all complicated. Complicated, a word people used when cruelty had friends. The clinic sat at the edge of town beside a feed store and a row of cottonwoods still bare from winter. Behind it, in a narrow rescue stall bedded deep with fresh shavings, the mare finally stood under warmth instead of fluorescent neglect. A heat lamp cast a soft amber pool over her ribs. Clean water waited in a shallow tub. The puppies lay bundled in blankets and towels, fed in tiny, careful intervals, their bodies no longer shivering with the same frantic violence as before. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. Victory was too clean a word for what came next. Ava stood outside the stall with her phone in one hand and a clipboard in the other while Lila updated the treatment chart. Refeeding protocol, electrolytes, shoulder evaluation, puppy hydration schedule, weight checks, microchip documentation, injury photographs. Every line of ink was a form of resistance now, every timestamp a nail in somebody's lie. The mare lifted her head when Ava stepped near the stall door. Not much, just enough. That small movement reached Ava harder than gratitude ever could. She had named the mare in her mind by then, though she had not said it aloud yet. Mercy. Not because the world had shown her any, because she had kept choosing it anyway. A knock came at the clinic office door. Not tentative. Official. Leela glanced toward the sound and muttered, "That'll be them." Ava already knew. There are moments when trouble announces itself before anyone speaks. It was there now in the rhythm of the knock. In the way the front bell did not jingle a second time. In the silence that followed, heavy and practiced. Pike had come dressed in procedure before. He would come dressed in procedure again. Ava handed Lila the clipboard. "Keep treating them." Lila met her eyes. "You don't have to do this alone." Ava gave the smallest nod. "I know." It was a new sentence in her mouth. "I know." Not "I'm fine." Not "I've got it." Not "stay out of it." "I know." At the front desk stood Harlan Pike, folder under his arm, and beside him a uniformed deputy Ava recognized from town deputy Elena Ruiz. Steady-eyed, late 40s, he not the type to enjoy being used as background furniture. That helped. A little. Pike offered Ava a thin, controlled smile. "Miss Brooks." Ava stopped 6 feet away. "Commissioner, I'm here to inform you that a formal complaint has been filed." "I got the email. I assumed you had." He opened the folder. "Interference with county-regulated livestock transfer. Obstruction, unlawful removal of animals pending disposition. Behind the words stood Marlon Vicks, leaning against the doorframe like a man attending his own victory speech. Clean jacket, clean boots, same polished calm. But something had changed in him since morning. The polish was still there. The confidence was not. He had the brittle look of someone forced to move faster than planned. Ava looked at him only once. That was enough. He still thought this was about leverage. He still thought the system would do what it had always done, tire out the decent people until evil became the cheaper option. Pike continued, "If the animals remain on site pending a county review, you may also be held financially responsible for temporary stabilization." There it was, the visible cost. Not abstract now, not moral. Concrete. Bills, liability, paper. The language adults feared because it attached compassion to consequence and dared you to call it worth it. Ava looked at the folder in his hands. Then at the stall beyond the hallway where Mercy stood over 5 orphaned lives she had no reason to guard except love and grief. Then back at Pike. "What do you need?" she asked. He seemed almost pleased by the question. "A signature acknowledging transfer dispute and a temporary hold agreement." Marlon smiled faintly. He thought she was cornered. He thought she would flinch at the price tag. Maybe 6 months ago she would have. Maybe even yesterday morning. But some people only discover the shape of their backbone when somebody finally places a real weight on it. Ava took the pen Pike extended. Ruiz watched quietly. Leela had come to the hallway now, still wearing gloves, face set in that hard veterinary calm that meant Fury had found discipline. In one arm she carried the printed scan results. In the other hand, the red, torn collar sealed in a clear evidence bag. Pike noticed too late. Lila said, "Before she signs anything, I'll be attaching medical findings to the record." Marlon's jaw tightened. Pike exhaled through his nose. "Doctor, this is an administrative—" "No," Lila said, and laid the papers on the desk one by one. "This is a cruelty record, severe malnutrition, improper restraint injuries, probable blunt force trauma, microchipped puppies tied to a registered breeding line, and postpartum evidence in the mare consistent with recent full loss." That changed the air. Even Pike felt it. Not emotionally, strategically, because paperwork only favored men like him when the other side had less of it. Ruiz stepped forward at last. "I'd like copies of all documentation." Marlon looked at her. For what?" Ruiz answered without turning. "For whatever this becomes once I decide what I'm looking at." That was the first crack in his control. Ava felt it immediately. So did he. The mare gave a low, trembling nicker from the stall. One of the puppies answered. The sound traveled down the clinic hallway like a thread pulled through cloth, stitching everything together. The barn, the trailer, the lies, the rope burn, the text, the scanner chirp, the heat lamp, the cost. This was no longer a strange story about a horse and puppies. This was evidence with a heartbeat. Pike cleared his throat. "Ms. Brooks, the signature." Ava looked down. Temporary guardian responsibility. Financial obligation pending outcome. Cooperation with county investigation. The lines were simple. That was the cruelty of forms. They reduced turning points into blank spaces and expected the human soul to fit neatly on the dotted line. Marlon leaned slightly forward. "Careful," he said. "This gets expensive." Ava looked up. He should not have spoken, because his voice carried the exact confidence of a man who had counted on fear for too long. He still believed money was the final argument. That grown people, broken people, ordinary people, always stopped when they saw the personal cost written clearly enough. He did not understand that some choices stopped being financial the moment they became moral. Ava signed. Not dramatically, not with shaking hands. Calmly, like a woman initialing the end of one life and the beginning of another. The pen clicked once as she set it down. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ruiz picked up the treatment photos. Then the scan record. Then the evidence bag. Then, finally, Ava's video statement from that morning, already forwarded to Lila's printer. Marlin saw where this was going before Pike did. "That video means nothing," he said quickly. "You don't have context." Ruiz looked at him for the first time with open skepticism. "Then I'm sure context will help you." Pike's tone sharpened. "Deputy." This is outside," Ruiz cut him off. "No. It stopped being outside when someone described live animals as debris and tried to move them before veterinary review." Silence. Real silence this time. Not hesitation. Collapse. The kind that happens when bad people realize the script has left them behind. Ava watched Marlin's face as the math changed. The breeding chip record. The transport logs. The no paper trail text. The mare with no clean ownership trail. The postpartum exam. The video. The witnesses in the lot. The clinic hold. One piece alone, maybe deniable. Together. A pattern. And patterns frightened men like Marlin more than outrage ever could. By late afternoon, the county hearing had been moved up to emergency review. Not a courtroom. Not yet. A cramped boardroom with fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and 6 folding chairs set around a table too small for what was about to happen. But justice in rural places rarely arrived wearing grandeur. It came in plain rooms, through tired people when one decent person finally refused to sit down. Ava sat with Lila on one side, Pike and Marlin on the other. Ruiz near the end of the table, report open. The brand inspector, a weathered man named Nolan Pierce, arrived last with a file under his arm and bad news for the wrong side. The mare's markings had been deliberately obscured, not professionally, sloppily. Enough to confuse a quick check, not enough to withstand scrutiny. That ended the last clean lie. After that, the room changed speed. Ruiz played the video. Marlin objected. Too late. The board heard him say, "Worthless." Heard him order the problem dumped. Heard the clang against metal. Heard the puppy cry. Heard Ava's voice, steady as steel. "Then I'll lose it. Open the damn gate." And because truth sometimes needs one final witness, they also heard Mercy's broken knicker under it all, the sound of a grieving mother protecting what the world had marked disposable. By the end of the review, Pike looked smaller. Marlin looked dangerous in a diminished way, like a fire denied oxygen but still searching for dry wood. Protective custody was granted. Seizure review initiated. Transport record subpoenaed. Criminal cruelty inquiry opened. The pipeline, whatever exact shape it had taken, was no longer invisible. When Ava stepped out of the county building, the sun was already dropping low, gold light catching in the edges of the bare trees. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt tired in the deepest possible way. Not defeated, used, as if the day had burned through old scar tissue and left something raw but living underneath. Lila came down the steps beside her. "You know this still might cost you the job." Ava looked out at the parking lot where ordinary people were loading groceries, checking tires, living little lives untouched by what had almost happened behind an auction barn that morning. "Maybe," she said. Lila studied her. "You okay?" Ava thought about the apartment, the empty chair, the leash hook, the rule she had spent years worshipping because distance felt safer than hope. Then she thought about Mercy lowering herself beside those puppies for the first time, about the smallest one crawling into warmth, about the impossible stubbornness of love when love had every reason to quit. "No," Ava said honestly. Then she surprised herself with the rest. "But I think I'm finally pointed in the right direction." That night, back at the clinic, the new normal began quietly. Mercy stood in clean bedding and drank without fear. The puppies, fed and warmed, slept in a heap beneath a heat lamp, their breathing no longer ragged with cold. A handwritten calendar had already been pinned near the stall weights, meds, follow-up exams, county hearing dates. Routine, care, the consistency, the ordinary architecture of hope. Ava opened the stall door and stepped inside. Mercy lifted her head, watched her, then gave one soft nicker, not desperate now, not breaking, just low and wary and real. Ava leaned against the stall wall and let the moment settle. People liked miracles because miracles required nothing from them except wonder. But healing was different. Healing asked for mornings, paperwork, feed bills, testimony, showing up again after the dramatic moment ended. That was the truth nobody put on inspirational posters. Love did not prove itself in rescue. It proved itself in what came after. A puppy stirred, yawned, and tumbled into the others. Mercy lowered her muzzle toward them, counting by touch. Still here. Ava smiled for the first time all day. Small, tired, real. Then she looked at the calendar on the wall, at the stall, at the living proof that discarded things were still capable of becoming somebody's mission. And in that amber light, with the county fight just beginning and the rest of her life no longer arranged in the old, safe order, Ava Brooks understood what the world had tried for years to teach her and what Mercy had finally corrected. Worthless was never a description. It was an excuse, and hope was never a miracle. It was a decision people made again tomorrow.